The title of the message is Cultivating Resilience. And we've had an introduction to it as we read the daily word today. It said that we cultivate this resilience on our spiritual path by living a life that is spiritual. What is this living a spiritual life, and how can we do it? Does Jesus talk about this? Is this something that he taught? This resilience, this ability to bounce back no matter what's going on around us. This ability to find our center in the midst of whatever's going on within us and around us. A spiritual path, living from a spiritual place, to me, means that my focus isn't always on what's going on out there. It's not a focus on my body. It's not a focus on who my personality wants me to think that I am. More, it's a focus on who I really and truly am. It's a knowing that there is so much more to this world and this life than what we can sense with our sight, with our smell, with our touch, with our hearing, and that other one. There is an inner knowing that is available to us. We went in prayer today to get in connection with the presence of God that's within us. It's this presence that is spirit. We set aside our thoughts of what's to come later in the day. We set aside those feelings that may have come up as we travel here, so that we may experience the silence within us. I invite you to practice finding that silence regularly as part of your life. This is a spiritual practice. Jesus talked about it. He may have used words that didn't exactly say what I exactly said. But let me read something for you from the Gospel according to Mark. It's in chapter 4. And I'll read from the George Lamsa translation from the Aramaic language that Jesus spoke. So, Mark chapter 4, beginning with verse 26. And he said, Jesus said, "Such is the kingdom of God, as a man who casts seed into the ground, and he sleeps and rises up night and day. And the seed springs up and grows while he is not aware of it. For the earth causes it to yield fruit. And yet first it becomes a blade of grass, then an ear, and at last a full grain in the ear." How is this related to resilience and this living of a spiritual life that cultivates resilience in us? What is this seed that's sown? What is this kingdom of heaven? Some of you have heard me talk about the kingdom of heaven before, but since some of you may not have, I want to speak briefly about this phrase that's spoken by Jesus in Aramaic. First of all, kingdom is really a poor translation. The Aramaic word is malkuta, which first of all is feminine. So if instead of kingdom, it really would be queendom. But it's not really a place. Because Aramaic words that have a feminine gender are not a thing, like the podium. It's not like the breath that we feel on our hand if we breathe on our hand. It's the act of breathing that is our breath. A noun with a feminine gender in Aramaic is a process. So this kingdom of God It's not a place you can go to. And then there's other places in the Bible, in the Gospel of Thomas, where it talks about you just can't go there. If he says it's here or there, then you need to find a new teacher, basically. Who is our only teacher? Not me. I'm not pointing at myself. I'm pointing at my heart, because Spirit is our teacher, our only teacher. So, what's the seed then? Seed. We're planting seeds for one another right now. As we found the presence together, there was an energy shift in the room. It planted a seed in the hearts of those around us. That's why it's easier to find the stillness and the quiet when we gather together, because these seeds are being planted. These seeds are also in the ideas that we share with a spiritual orientation, an orientation that is towards things that are not of the external world, but they're inner to us. They may be experienced on the inside. So, this Malkuta, this guidance and counselship of God, when we know the truth, it's like a man who casts the seed into the ground, okay? So we've got this seed, we've received the seed, and then the man goes to sleep. It says he sleeps and rises up. Night and day, he's sleeping and rising up. If you've ever worked with remembering the truth of who you are, you'll know that times you woke up and realized I wasn't remembering the truth of who I was. I wasn't expressing the highest self in me. Perhaps I have grown angry with someone I love and said things that I didn't really mean because they weren't coming from the truth. One characteristic you can know about when you're coming from truth is things are said in love. There's a feeling, a taste of it. You feel peace, feel joy. These anger feelings, these anxiety feelings, they can never come from that place of center. So this waking up is bringing ourselves back to the center, back to the presence of God. And it's inevitable that we're going to fall asleep. But it's this process of bringing ourselves back to center every time we realize we've fallen to sleep. This is what's going on that causes the seed to spring up. Because that's the next line. After this rising and falling asleep, the seed springs up and grows, and we're not even aware that it's happening. We are changing subtly every time we go through this process. And it may seem like we're making no progress at all because we're still angry, just as angry as we ever have been. And yet, we are. That seed is growing where we can't see it. And then the earth yields its fruit. The earth, that's us. We yield this fruit. It's a gradual process. First a blade of grass, then the ear. Think about corn. You can think about wheat. They also call that an ear. And last, the full grain in the ear. Kernel of corn, kernel of wheat. So this is the process of cultivating our resilience. The resilience allows us to recognize that we've fallen asleep faster, earlier in the process. So that maybe instead of saying those words that is in our brain already, because we're on our way to being fully asleep, we realize, hey, I'm headed there again. And I can head it off at the past and perhaps realize this is not the truth of who I am. This is not me. This is that other thing that's in me, that creature, personality or ego. But that's not the truth of who I am. Who I am would never say this thing that I'm thinking. And it doesn't get spoken, maybe this time. Or maybe we realize that, hey, I have just gotten very stressed out. I'm worried about this meeting that I've got to come up with because this guy's always ill. It seems like he brings whatever trouble he's got into every meeting and I can't say anything right. Well, I can let that stress go. And when I walk into that room, the energy of the room is different. My energy is different. The energy of the room becomes a little different. And maybe one day when I walk into that room with that person, some of that energy which has been planted as a seed within this other person begins to sprout within him or her. First the blade of grass, and then the ear, and then the full grain in the ear. That's another whole sermon we can go into about what that means when we talk about the blade grass, the ear. I've got a song I wrote about it. Maybe we'll have that another time, and I'll sing that song for you. So we cultivate our resilience by this diligence of our spiritual path. Not getting upset with ourselves, not getting angry at ourselves because we have gone asleep again, but instead realizing that I have fallen asleep and returning back to the center. And I know that Lindsay's going to speak about A Course in Miracles, and I learned a word last week and really got it this time, and it's called atonement. Now, that word has meaning. It carries a lot of baggage with it if you've come out of some other faiths, some other Christian teachings. But what we mean is this process of waking up. When we realize that we are all part of God. You know, I am the vine and you are the branches. We are all together part of this same growth that is creation, that is life. And when we realize that we are all part of the same life, how can we be angry? How can we feel anything but love and joy and peace? This process of atonement is the process of realizing I have fallen asleep, making the effort to hand over whatever it is to God, come back to a feeling of oneness. And I say feeling because it's not a mental thing. It's a knowing, it's a feeling, it's just different. And you'll know you're there because of the taste. Your body will feel different. Your mind will be somehow different. If there's any judgment, any sense of separation, I need another deep breath, another pause, so that I can find that center. That's why we practice. I have a meditation practice every morning. It doesn't have to look like the same for every one of us, but we need some time to practice finding the silence and going back to center. If we make it a regular habit, it becomes easier when we're in the middle of whatever life is bringing to us, or whatever we're bringing into life. Because a lot of this is brought on by our own thoughts, our own patterns that have been, we could even think of it as being cultivated. These patterns were cultivated as we grew up. I think of plowing a field, making a row. You know, is that row going to be all like this and rough, or is it going to be nice and smooth and straight? So those are the patterns that are in our thoughts, and they tend to repeat themselves. Resilience allows us not to be affected or to recover from being affected, because it's inevitable. But this is the process of how we grow. Continually falling asleep, realizing we're asleep, coming back to center. I can't wait to hear your perspectives on cultivating resilience when we get to our circle of light. And I hope you all stay around for it. Because to me, it's much more valuable than hearing me stand up here and speak.